Ladies and gentlemen, guest today is Dr. Alex Tam. We talk about a variety of different things, ranging from back pain, chronic pain, to the healthcare system in the United States, getting people healthy, and how this guy has invested in over 500 doors in the real estate world. That kind of shocked me. He just dropped 500 in at the end of the episode, and I was like, whoa. I knew he was a real estate investor, but I did not know that he was that serious. So a lot to be learned, both on the medical side of things and on the business side of things. Friends, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, please do that. It does mean a lot to us. Give us a 5-star review on all the places that you consume the podcast. And last but not least, if you take value from this, share it with a friend. Share it with someone out there who's a business owner, wants to be a business owner, future entrepreneur, because if you're taking value, they might take some value, and we can grow the community of people out there who are working hard to learn more about the world and grow into their business career. So thank you very much, friends. Enjoy it. Alex, good morning. How are you?
Doing fantastic. What about yourself?
I am great, man. So appreciate you taking the time to hop on the call. You're in beautiful California, so we'll let you get out there into the sunny weather. But you have an interesting background, both health and real estate. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and give us an update on what you've been up to over the last couple of years?
Oh, absolutely. Started off as a chiropractor in 2009 and built our practice. Phenomenal practice with two other doctors now. So there's three of us and five other staff members. And I play more of a clinical director role
Mm.
on top of still seeing a few patients here and there. And back in 2018, I went to a real estate conference and a business conference and fell in love with the fact that you can actually start investing in real estate with other people, not only in single family, but in multifamily.
Mm.
And shortly after that, I joined a real estate mastermind group and has now partnered with multiple people in the group, from GPs, general partnerships, to being joint venture, still doing limited partnerships. And now what I do is I help a lot of doctors look at deals to make sure that it's right for them. And the doctors who want to be passive, we bring them along the deals that we currently have. So that's it's been pretty exciting doing that.
So two exciting spaces right now. Take me back to the beginning, brother. How did you decide to go into this medical field? And is this where you assumed you would go into chiropractic care and then real estate, or has it been serendipitous?
I'll tell you, my parents has always looked at the medical field as something that, being growing up in an Asian family, you're either a doctor, engineer, accountant, lawyer, one of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And medicine runs more in the family.
Mm.
I have a family member in Hong Kong who's a chief of staff in a hospital. My aunt's a nurse. My dad reads a lot of medical books.
Mm.
So naturally, the route for me was to become a medical doctor. And that's what I was on track for. In 2002, my mom suffered from something called trigeminal neuralgia,
Mm.
which is a nerve pain of the face. It feels like someone's taking a needle and stabbing you in the face for about 50 to 100 times. And we've been to all the medical doctors, taken medications. They did Botox shots and cortisone shots along her neck and her head. No help. And 2 years in, one of the medical doctors says, well, now we have to do surgery.
Mm.
The neurologists are talking. They said, we got to cut off this part of their face, open
Oh.
it up, snip the nerve, and she can't feel that side of her face. There's a chance she won't be able to move it again. But it's not a guarantee that the pain's going to completely go away because nerve endings do grow back.
Mm.
And that's where we said, you know what, let's put a hold on this, because we've been going at this for 2 years with you guys, and nothing's worked.
Mm-hmm.
We started reaching out to family friends. That's when people started giving us advice. because we're pretty reserved, pretty private family.
Mm.
And as people started reaching out, we saw help from a chiropractor who's a natural doctor about 3 hours away. When he first took the x-rays, he told my mom that she must have injured her neck about early 20s or late teens. And I said, how did you know? And my mom didn't think much of it. But during one of her first treatments, she says, you know what? Translate to the doctor this. What happened was she was riding her bike to work when she was about 17, 18. She fell off the bike, hit her head on the guardrail, didn't think much of it, but has had a few car accidents throughout
Mm.
her life, and now come back to bid her 50 in her 50s now.
Mm.
And her results with that doctor was after 3 months, she was 50% better. And at the time I said, that's when I realized this is what I want to do. This is
Mm.
what gave hope to our family. It was a terrible 2 years that has completely shifted 180 degrees. And that's how I became a chiropractor to begin with.
Mm. That's an amazing story, and actually, that's a lot of what I want to talk about today because I know you have more of like a holistic, natural approach to medicine. I'm sure you've been kind of keeping up with all these Senate hearings. Have you been seeing some of this stuff that's going on right now with this?
It's kind of crazy
Yeah.
in
So
health.
for anybody who's not aware, there's been some. Well, a lot of people who've spoken in front of the Senate, but there was a group of like doctors and people who are just interested in wellness, including Brigham Bueller and Callie and Casey Means. Those are the names that I've kind of become familiar with now. Talking about our healthcare system, they've done a bunch of the big podcasts out there. So if you want to hear what they have to say, you can go find them on JRE and Chris Williamson and places like that. But essentially, they stood up in front of Congress and said, "Hey, look, this is an epidemic in the United States. Like our
Mhm.
industries have been captured, our pharmacology industry has been captured, our hospitals have been captured by poor incentives, not leading to patient outcomes that we want. Our food industries have been co-opted, and now we're poisoning people. And like we need essentially like a revolution, is what they're calling for." And I think that's part of what led you to where you are, if I'm not mistaken, that you saw the way
Right,
that the system worked and you went, wait a minute, like this isn't working for us. And it's almost more frustrating sometimes when something simple fixes the problem than when something like grandiose fixes the problem, right? Like if you'd have went to that
right,
doctor and they'd have done a $200,000 surgery, you'd have been like, gosh, modern medicine is amazing. But when you go to a chiropractor and they do some adjustments, maybe some stretching, maybe some exercise, and that fixes it, you're like, hold on a minute. I need to reevaluate everything that I know about like
right.
medicine and science.
Absolutely. I mean, it's 100%. You're 100% true because what we're able to do now with our patients is instead of for hundreds of thousands of dollars, is for hundreds and or thousands to fix problem, not hundreds of thousands,
Hmm.
right? And it's mind-boggling what you can do naturally that in our Western medicine world, we try to fix surgically all the
Mm.
time.
Well, that's been a thing in Asian cultures for a long time, kind of that natural medicine. Did you take any inspiration from that? I know, am I correct in saying you were born in Hong Kong and then moved to the United States when you were
Right.
quite young?
Yeah. Yeah. I was born in Hong Kong and moved to the States when I was 8 years old. So you're
Mm.
correct there. And growing up, we've always had herbs, teas, all kinds of weird, stinky creams at the house. You didn't know what it was,
Mm.
right? And now it turned out, oh, Tiger Balm was became popular. It was something that we had at our house since as early as I could remember,
Hmm.
right? But it is very true. The way that our body is able to heal is phenomenal. We just have to allow it to heal and facilitate the healing. and help it along. A lot of the modern medications and pharmaceuticals, it's killing our organs on the inside.
Mm. Yeah, and one of the things that I heard from Callie and Casey Means, it was interesting, and I've never heard anyone say that before, but they said basically under the FDA guidelines, what you have to have is these double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. But there's certain treatments that you can't like do a placebo control. Like for instance, like if we wanted you to exercise, there's no logical way that we can do a double blind study where you don't know that you're exercising. So they said, like,
Right.
by nature, this makes it so that the only thing that can be considered like quote unquote medicine is pills, because pills are like the only thing that you can do like a double blind study on. So, like, Alex, you don't know if you're getting a pill or if you're getting a sugar pill. So then you can evaluate the results. And I was like, oh, that's really fascinating. I never thought of that way. So that's why a lot of this has been just sort of like pushed towards pills, 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 when we know that dietary and lifestyle interventions are much more powerful in most instances.
Absolutely. We just have to look at what people end up with, the conditions that they end up with when they don't exercise or when they don't eat right. We try to, a lot of times we try to put it as a science. And I ask some patients very simply, I say, that the things that you're eating day to day, the fast food that you're eating, the things I'm telling you to stop eating, would you ever feed your dog or cat that stuff? Oh no. Oh no. Why?
Yeah.
Why are you feeding yourself worse than your pets?
Yeah. What are the things that you're seeing amongst your patient population? Obviously, you're a chiropractor, so tell me if I'm wrong that your patient population kind of skews to that direction. But what does the average patient come in and see you look like?
Average patients, I'll tell you this, most people, when they're in their 20s and 30s, think that they can figure it out on their own,
Mm,
right? Because your body hasn't broken down enough where you can't really figure it out.
hmm
You
You're
you
pretty
can wait
pretty
it out.
robust. Yeah, at age
Right, you're
21,
pretty
22.
robust.
Yeah, you can pretty much eat
Yeah,
whatever you want. You can go out drinking. You can maybe smoke
yeah,
cigarettes, and you're like, I feel fine. I can go on and work. It's no big deal.
right, right. And into your 30s, you start realizing your body doesn't heal as fast, your bruises last a little bit longer, your aches and pains a couple days more.
Hmm.
But into your late 30s and 40s, that's when most people realize, oh crap, I cannot do the same thing that I used to do in my 20s and 30s, myself included, having the realization, myself included, that your body just doesn't have the same healing capability. So most of our patients are usually 40s and later. They come in and they've tried other places, whether it's doctors, pills, exercises, and it just hasn't worked. And it's gotten to the point where it's affected their lives, some form, some shape, or way, where it's now really severely impacting their lifestyle.
Yeah.
Maybe they can't put on their socks anymore,
Mm,
or their partner is saying, "Dude, you need to get this checked out. We're not even able to go on trips anymore.
mm.
They can't pick up their grandkids anymore," right? And now that's when I start getting to see them.
That is a sad reality of the American medical system, is that most people go to the doctor not when symptoms begin, but when they've become like so unbearable that it's like, I have to go to the doctor at this point in time. Because, well, a lot of people are uninsured, underinsured, because, I don't know what the cost of medical insurance is like in California. I have to imagine it's slightly higher than it is here in Columbus, Ohio. But to get like good insurance is like $400 a month, maybe $500 a month. And I'm like relatively young. God forbid that I was age 60, like looking for insurance on the open market. It's going to be 800, maybe even like $1,000 a month. Like I know
Oh yeah,
more than one person who's like, I want to retire, but I need to get to the point where I can get my Medicare benefits, or else like
right.
I literally cannot retire because I have to have like $1,000 a month insurance otherwise. Um, so being underinsured, and then there's just like unfortunately, the doctor experience has become just really unfortunate in the United States, where it's like you feel like you're kind
Right.
of cattle, you're getting moved along. What's wrong? Fill out this survey, fill out this thing. You see this doctor, they don't seem like they really have the attention span to talk to you. Sometimes they're very dismissive of your symptoms or what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've experienced it, and I'm young and healthy, so I can only imagine.
Right. And when you are going through something like that, day in and day out, you start to disregard the problem because other people are disregarding the problem. And when most people understand, well, why am I going to go to the doctor? They're just going to give me a pill, send me to PT and whatnot. I've been doing that and it hasn't worked. And then eventually what? The next thing is shots, surgery, walkers, and canes. I mean, ultimately, people have the understanding that this is what's going to happen. I'm just going to ride it out until I can't anymore, until it really affects something that they truly believe is important in their life. And then they do something about it. And that's when they usually end up in our doorsteps.
So, talk to me about what treatment would look like for you versus maybe the standard care that we have come to know in the United States.
Oh, it's completely different. We still, just like a lot of places, patients fill out paperwork, we sit down. When we sit down with them, it's not just about where are you feeling this problem? What's happening? During our consultation, our initial examination, we really try to figure out where did this start happening, right? We got to start digging, like not just what you are dealing with currently, but where did this begin? What's the root cause of this problem? We got to figure out, is it something that you're doing? Was it an injury that was induced somewhere? Where did we miss something, right? And most of the time is something chronic that happened. Oh, well, I just pulled my back last week. Yeah, you just pulled your back last week. But how long has this been going? Well, then we find out, oh, it's been going on for years where you
Mm-hmm.
pull your back out once a year or twice a year. Then we have to go through the diagnostics, do an exam, take x-rays. Because if your problem has been chronic and it's been years, your spine has changed. There's degeneration in there, whether you like it or not. And if someone goes in and starts working on you from the outside just by looking at you, that's like a mechanic looking at your car from the outside and say, you know what? We're going to replace this, 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 and this. Not ever doing a diagnostic, right? You would never do that.
Mm.
And I think ultimately finding the root cause of the problem. Is it something with their body? Is it something with their lifestyle? Is it something that they're eating? Right? Could it be emotions? That
Mm.
they're just stressed, right? Find out like we had a patient, their headaches are the worst at the end of the day. And then we realized, I said, what is happening? What tell me about your day. What does your day look like? And we realize that when they are stressed, they are looking at 3 different monitors. So at the end of the day, their bodies hunker down.
Mm.
And I said, consider taking a break midday, go out for a walk, get some vitamin D, make sure you drink all your water, do a few stretches. And it was a 15-minute extra of work on their end, but completely changing their environment at work as well. And they started getting better because we were like knocking on a brick wall that just wasn't coming down, you know. So figuring out the root cause is the key.
I think it's so easy to not realize all these things that you do on a day-to-day basis add in and accumulate. And I'm sure you know this, but even just subtle changes like moving your computer monitor up 3 inches, like might totally
Right.
alleviate your neck pain. There's
Right.
it's not always simple, right? But sometimes it is that simple that it's like, hey, you spent all day like doing this thing as opposed to like, posture being right. And you don't have to actually fix that for that long for that to feel better. I just heard a story about a surgeon who they were a neurosurgeon and they had to have another neurosurgeon operate on them to fix their neck because all day long they just were craned down looking at bodies. And I was like, oh man, that's so brutal that like it all comes full circle for them. But at the same time, the old adage is true. For a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. For a surgeon, everything looks like, hey, the fix for this is surgery. And I do think that has become a big thing in the medical industry. We're so specialized that everyone is like, well, hey, my specialty is neurosurgery. Alex has back pain. Like, I could fix this with surgery.
Right, right, and it's so true that when the phrase that you said, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And it's not always the same thing for our patients. That's why we have multiple different types of treatments for people. And sometimes it's not even that. We had a young guy come in the other day. We tested his knee and he's like, "Oh, I got knee pain." And usually we will treat a knee a certain way depending on what the problem is. And after the exam, we said, one of my doctors were like, have you ever had an MRI yet? Because this looked like you tore a ligament a good chunk of the way,
Mm,
where his leg just gives out and buckles in. And he's like, "I've never had an MRI." I said, "Why don't you do this? Get that MRI, bring us back the report, and we'll figure out what needs to be done." And it's a lot of times it's getting to the root cause of the problem.
mm.
But some doctors will just be like, "Hey, take a pill," you know?
And why do you think that chiropractors maybe have like a mild to slightly negative? That's my perception. Tell me if you think that I'm wrong
Yeah,
here. Mild to
yeah, yeah,
slightly
yeah.
negative rap. I mean, I think that a lot of doctors at this point, I think there was a lot of trust lost over multiple years, but I think COVID lost a lot of
Right.
trust. But I do hear some people kind of dragging on chiropractic care. Do you feel that and get that sense? And if so, why
Oh,
do you think that's true?
100%. 100%. The reason why that's true is because there are there are good and bad in every profession,
Yeah.
right? And some decide to do it right, some decide to not do it right. And just like in other fields, chiropractor is the same way. There are ones where you go in, they just, oh, look at you and start working on you right away. And there are some that really sits down and figures out what the real problem is. But at the same time, it's the ones who try to do it right versus the ones who aren't doing it correctly. And you always know negative publicity gets 11 times more than positive
Everybody wants
publicity.
to hear about the story of the chiropractor who cracked somebody's neck and then they had, a bleed into their brain or something like that.
Right.
That's a sensational story, and we go, "Oh my
And
gosh, this is
yeah.
crazy."
And look at what's happening online when people are addicted to cracking videos and right, people are freaked out. There
Yeah.
are patients that come in and they'll say, "Dr. Tim, you're not gonna like twist my neck like those YouTube videos, right?" And I was like, "No, that's not what we do here." But
Mm,
people who've had a negative experience and uh, they start telling everybody. And you've also had doctors who have been caught scamming insurances and
mm.
workers comp back in the 80s and 90s that has been shut down. But there's a lot of good guys, and a lot of people who've been helped, and but it's not mainstream yet.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. You say it's not mainstream, whereas like a pediatrician, that's mainstream. But like I don't look at the field of pediatrics overall as like bad. I don't look at chiropractic care as bad, just like you said. There's good police officers and bad police officers. There's good singers
Right,
and really bad singers. So it is interesting that we judge like a lot of other professions like that, but then certain professions we sort of just like are willing to group together. And I think
right,
chiropractic care is a little bit like that. That people are like, well, that's like pseudoscience. That's not like real medicine. And I'm like, okay, well, what is real medicine? Like, would you feel better if Dr. Alex like gave you a prescription for
right,
Vyvanse or for Adderall or for an opiate? Like, is that medicine
right,
now? Like, is a
right.
trainer
But I
not
think
like?
people have to,
Yeah,
yeah, they have to try other things that hasn't worked before they try something alternative
mm, yeah,
because it is mainstream because they hear their parents talk about it, their brothers talk about it, their neighbors, like, oh, try this, try this, try this, try this. And I tell our crew and our staff and our doctors, I said, from the day we left school, we knew this was uphill, like we're like salmon swimming upstream all the time.
You feel like
But
you're
we hold to
outsiders
our
in the
belief.
medical system?
Well, we feel like there's always pushback somehow in some way in our profession, and it's almost like we have to prove ourselves. But
Mm,
I said we just have to do it that much better and get phenomenal results. I said
mhm,
that's all it is. That's all that is.
yeah.
And we do.
And the results speak for themselves, and that's probably a rewarding thing about, like, joint type issues is that you very clearly can know if things are getting better. If someone's like, "I've had
Right.
back pain for 10 years," and then you work with them for 6, 12 months, and they're like, "I feel amazing," then you're like, "Well, we're doing the right things." Whereas sometimes, to your point, like,
Yeah.
if I'm dealing with someone who has whatever, cancer or a brain tumor or diabetes that's like not going to be able to be fixed, then you're like, "Oh, I'm helping them manage, but we're not really fixing this."
And it's just so important for our patients to tell their stories, and for doctors to get the stories from their patients
Mhm.
to get the word out there, right? I mean, we're doing phenomenal work helping patients going upstairs. We had a patient that came in who hasn't been upstairs for 6 months
Mm.
because his knees just wouldn't work. And he went upstairs for the first time after just about a month and a half of treatment.
Mm.
He's like, oh my God, I can't believe I was able to go upstairs again, you know? So something, it's just things like that.
Mm. So, talk to me if someone is experiencing some amount of joint pain somewhere, whether knees, hips, ankles, back, and neck, I'm sure are huge in your profession. How would you coach
Right.
them up on starting that process of seeking treatment and seeking a remedy?
That's a great question. When someone's at home, if it's the first time you've had it, usually it's probably they did something that inflamed it. Considering if your body's healthy. Now, if your body's not healthy, you're completely inflamed, right? Then you got to fix that as well,
Mhm.
right? So you got to really look at where it's coming from first. But if something's been lingering around for more than 4 to 6 weeks, it's time to go to a specialist and figuring out like what in the world's going on.
Mhm.
Get some imaging, get an exam, look at it, look at the joint first.
Mm.
But also, when someone dives in and look at one joint, don't look at just the one joint. For
Mhm.
example, the knee. You also have to look at above and below. What's going on with the ankle? What's going on with the pelvis and lower back? Those two big joints above and below. Because then sometimes a knee could be compensating for a separate problem, right? And
Uh,
I make this example all the time. I said, just because your wheel's wobbling doesn't mean you got to replace tires.
right. I've heard the knee is kind
Maybe
of
it's the alignment.
a dumb joint. It just does whatever the ankle and hip tell it to do.
Well, it's a hinge joint, right? It connects your feet to the rest of your body,
Mhm.
you know. So you got to look at everything.
So you would request imaging, like an MRI potentially? Would that be the correct form of
MRI
imaging?
and X-ray, have
Make
someone
sure
do an exam.
nothing's broken.
Yeah,
Yep.
just to see what's happening. Don't go for a pill or you don't want to ice or heat it. Sometimes it could be the wrong thing to do.
Mhm.
Most people just throw ice on it. I said, well, in a chronic joint that's not completely swollen, you put ice on it, you're just decreasing blood flow now. You
Right.
don't know if that's the right thing to do,
Mhm.
right?
Okay,
The
so
worst thing is ignoring it.
let's say we get some imaging, and how often on those pieces of imaging are you going to see something that's glaring and obvious? Alex, you have neck pain. Well, you've got a herniated disc in your neck. Well, that's obvious.
Yeah,
Or how often is it we don't really see anything that's glaring with you, Alex? Like, we need to
right.
maybe look at some other treatment modalities.
Well, I'll tell you this. About, I'll say 50 to 60% of the diagnosis is actually not just in the imaging or the exam. is in the consultation and the history with the patient
Mm,
on what they've done. The imaging is just one piece. That's why you have to sit down with the patient and you got to talk to them, right? Figure out what's going on, what's their lifestyle, injuries, chronicity, doing a physical exam, and then do imaging. And then you piece all three together,
I see.
right? Can't just be imaging. This is another area where we get wrong a lot of times, is because the radiologist only looks at the imaging
Mm,
without really understanding what's the patient's history, what does their ortho exam look like, and now you get a lot of false negatives,
oh,
you know.
false negatives. Interesting. I've also
Yeah,
heard
false negatives.
I've also heard that if you whatever stand 10 people up into an MRI and give them all a back MRI, a good portion of them are going to have like things that are apparent that are problematic, like maybe herniated disc or slightly herniated discs, or misalignment of some sort, that may not actually be resulting in pain or issues with the patient. Is
Yes,
that true?
you're correct. You're correct, because our bodies are phenomenal at realigning or compensating on its own, or
Mm,
misaligning on its own. If
mm,
the herniation's on the left, chances are your body will start leaning the other way
mm,
to compensate. So that when you take the MRI, boom, clear problem. Patient's like, I got no symptoms, but they're
mm.
completely standing like, like all wonky.
So if a patient came in like that, maybe they're not standing crazy, ill off to the side, but if you do a scan of whatever, you're looking for a lower back issue, you do a scan of the total back and you say, "Hey, there's actually like an issue up higher in your back. Maybe you have a slight herniation." Are you
Right,
going to are you going to immediately try to work on that, or if the patient's not experiencing any pain, are you going to kind of say, "Hey, like this is not a painful issue for you at the current moment in time. Like we don't necessarily need to take intervention, especially not like a surgical intervention." Because I'm sure
right.
you could talk to it at more length than me, but everyone I know that's had like a back surgery and neck surgery,
Oh my
that's the
God.
beginning of the end.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's because our body is not meant for that.
Mm,
Just so you know, when you have a surgery, let's say a knee surgery or a back surgery, your body cannot differentiate, your brain cannot differentiate. Did you just get bit by a lion? Or did a surgeon use a scalpel to open you up and put screws in you?
mm-hmm,
When you get a knee surgery and they amputate your leg, that's what happens in a knee surgery. They don't know if you got, your brain doesn't know if you got bit by a shark or did a surgeon do it. So our brain doesn't understand that.
mm-hmm,
So when you go through something like that and it's so traumatic, the rest of your body is guaranteed to compensate in a negative way,
mm.
right? So it's one of those things. Going back to your question, do we work on it right away? Do we not? We got to figure out, is that the cause of the problem,
See,
right? If that was the cause, we got to address it.
mm-hmm,
We had a patient, he came in with a shoulder problem. We took an X-ray, and when he mentioned something about his back, I said, let's just see what's going on with your back. And then we saw that he lost 60% of his disc space in his lower back.
mm,
I told him, I said, we could just address your shoulder. I said, but what in the world happened to your back?
mm-hmm.
And he's like, I did a lot of martial arts, a lot of jiu-jitsu, a
Oh yeah,
lot of karate. And now, once in a while, you're right, my legs do go numb.
that's pretty serious when your legs are
What?
going numb.
Once in a while.
Guys, I'm
But
sure whenever you hear something like that, it's always a guy. It's like every once in a while my legs go numb, but it's not a big deal.
yeah,
You're like women
not a
would.
big deal, but my shoulder's been
Yeah.
killing me.
Meanwhile, women are in the ER, like
Yeah. And I told him this. I said, I'll be upfront with you. we could fix the shoulder, no problem. But if you let your back go like this, you're only in your 50s. I don't know how your back's going to be in your 60s.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going numb right now, which means that the next thing that starts going out are the muscles will start going out. Right? He's like, well, can we fix that too? I said, yeah, no, absolutely. I recommend, if I were you, I would fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I treat everyone as I'm looking at them, if they were my uncle, my father, my mom. And I said, here's the truth. Okay? You tell me what you want to do. My job is to communicate to you what is happening and what your options are. My job is not to tell you what to do. My job is to give you the information so you take it and then you decide what you want to do.
I love that, an educational approach.
Yeah. We're like mentors. We're like your health advocates. And that's all we are. Your body's your body. Right.
So in a person like that, you say, let's work on it. What does that work fundamentally look like?
Well, for his back, where the disc has been compressed so much, you got to start working on starting something called spinal decompression to open up that disc
Is that
without
real?
surgery.
Is that real? Because I've
Absolutely.
heard different opinions on this.
That technology was brought on by it was a scientist from Canada, and they got it from Canada to the US. There were lawsuits against bringing that machine in because it was going to impact the amount of surgeries that could be done.
Mm.
And it's phenomenal. Not the inversion tables that
Okay.
can possibly give you strokes, but the
Okay.
spinal decompression tables where you're laying flat.
Okay, so I'm laying flat, and then what's happening? Like I'm sort of being pulled apart by a
There's a motor
mechanism?
on one end, and it's stretching your spine
Mm. Okay. What
longitudinally.
what issue do you have with like the tables that invert you? I'm not gonna lie to you, Alex, I have some teeter hangups. I got the gravity
I,
boots here in the office.
I know
I
a
don't use
lot of
them
people do.
honestly often as I could. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt to like get it all set up.
There are, in the last few years, more and more reports of strokes happening
Okay.
because you're upside down. What's the first sign of a stroke? It's a stroke. There has been collapse and breakdown of those pins on the tables. We've had two patients, one fractured T12, another fractured T4.
From a table like
Okay.
breaking.
Collapsing and breaking.
Ooh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And those things, there's ultimately, there's attorneys out there who represent people who've been injured by those inversion tables. And guess who uses these tables more? They're usually people who have back problems,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes they're a little bit more sedentary, and you can't hang upside down for that long. That's why when you're in a roller coaster, when you're upside down, that's an emergency. They're shutting down that side of the
Yeah,
park,
right.
getting all the, yeah. So that's the problem. And the effectiveness of it is because when you're hanging by your ankle's going to stretch, Stephen. Your knees are going to stretch. Your hips will stretch before it ever gets to your lower back.
I gotcha. So
Right.
would it be more effective than if it's like almost like a waist kind of belt that's pulling at like
If it's a
waist
waist
and
belt,
shoulders?
that you can figure out how many poundage that is pulling and in a correct angle. But the more important thing about spinal decompression is how much time and pressure you're letting it come back when you take the weight off. You
Mm,
can't just take the weight off.
I see.
There's a rebound effect when you take the weight off where it doesn't allow that disc to slowly come back.
Mm.
That's why it's timed. When the disc opens up, you got to go like this and it stays, and then you got to open. When it comes back, it's got to be the same thing as
Yeah.
well.
Are there? That sounds like a machine that I can't afford. So are there any
It's
like?
not a machine that you can fit. Let's just,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a pretty big machine.
It's like a clinical machine, right? So are there
Yeah.
any mechanisms that are similar that can be done at home that you advocate for?
I tell patients that they can lean over a exercise ball,
Okay.
right? Get a big enough exercise ball, just lean over it,
Mm. So
right?
just
And
kind of
let
like
the weight
bending.
of your legs
I got
and
you.
the weight of your head, right? Your head's kind of like at an angle like this, and then your legs are like this. Let it open up a little bit like that,
Yeah,
and just go slow and see how it does.
I have a reverse hyperextension machine here at the office. Very
Right,
similar, where you're flat on the bench and your legs are just dangling down below you. And Louis
right,
Simmons, who
right.
I've actually had the fortune to meet, the late Louis Simmons, a couple of times, he'd say it's
Yeah,
guaranteed to fix a herniated disc in your back. I don't know about guaranteed,
and
but
it's
that's the words of
right,
Louis. Yeah.
right, right.
Okay, so a little bit of decompression. What is that like foundational point number one? We're going to start to decompress you.
Foundational point number one: you have to look at, okay, is the spine in good alignment? If it's not in good alignment, well, it's like a car. You can pump up the tires, but it's not in good alignment.
Okay.
You gotta fix the alignment.
Mm,
Then we have to look at, okay, what else can we facilitate? And one thing that has helped a lot of patients in clinical studies is cold laser therapy. Because the cold laser therapy gets deep into that disc and starts rehydrating that area,
it's called
gets more blood flow to it.
cold laser therapy.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
cold laser therapy. Some people call it low level laser therapy because it's, you got hot laser where it's the, for cutting,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, cold laser goes in, but it gets deep.
Mm,
And then on top of that, most of the time there's a lot of scar tissue around that area,
makes
right?
sense.
You can't massage out scar tissue, okay? Because it's just, people say, oh, break down the fascia from the outside. It's very difficult to do.
Okay.
Well, we use a technology called shockwave therapy.
Okay.
Shockwave therapy was a derivative of the machine that used to break down kidney stones, lithotripsy.
Hmm.
But they dialed it down, and now you break down scar tissue using sound waves. So now you're creating a phenomenal environment by breaking down the scar tissue in the area. You've got great blood flow coming in. The disc is physically getting opened up, and you are now realigning the body to get ready for all of that.
Hmm.
So at the same time, we make sure patients have great nutrition. There's certain supplements you need to take. We take out all the bad inflammatory foods and we add in all the good ones, right? We teach people how to take good care of themselves, ergonomically how to do it,
Mm.
stretches that they have to do. You really have to do a bunch of things to a multiple. It's a whole ecosystem to really facilitate the healing.
Yeah, that's the annoying part. It took you 15 years to get sick, and you're like, I want to get well this
Right.
month. Like,
Oh
y-
yeah.
you're to your point, like the scar tissue thing. That's something I've started to learn a lot more about. It's like the fascia network. And there's some really interesting
Yeah.
stuff on YouTube about the fascia, and it seems like that's becoming a very popular topic right now in the health and biohacker sphere. But if it's super matted and knotted because you've sat like that or stood like that or your hips have been aligned in
Right.
a certain way for 15 years, to your point, it is going to be very difficult to just like it's not like a hose
It's like duct tape.
yeah, it's more like layers of duct tape that you're trying to remove the way that
Yeah.
I understand it.
Yeah. It's like layers of duct tape. And from the outside, how do you, if I put a big piece of meat on the outside, right? And then you layer a thick piece of tape, how do you break that down?
Mm,
You see,
mm,
it's almost impossible.
interesting. What about you said you clean up diet, nutrition, and supplementation. What are those pieces going to
Yeah.
look like for somebody?
Well, for starters, we take away dairy, gluten, refined sugar, and seed oil.
Okay. Seed
That's
oil,
for starters.
seed oil. I know that's another controversial one. Are you of the opinion that
That's it.
it's bad for you?
Well, it's not great for you, I tell you that. I mean, it does more harm than good, right? And
That's the team I'm also on. But I've heard arguments on both sides that sound reasonable. Sometimes it's tough to tell, right?
It's tough to tell, but it also, you have to look at who's arguing on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's the companies themselves arguing it, and the scientists that are backed by them arguing it.
And it's also just not that difficult to pull out of your diet. I mean, it's a little more difficult because from what I understand is a lot of restaurants will cook with like vegetable oils
Oh,
or things like
100%.
that.
100%.
Like which makes sense. Like, restaurant they're presenting
It's
everything
cheaper.
out front really great, but yeah, in the back they're cooking in any way they can.
Yeah. It's just cheaper, right?
Mhm.
And that's why people, it's a lost art when people don't cook. My wife loves to cook. I'm so blessed that she
Mhm.
loves doing that. But it is a lost it's a lost art, right? And the reason why those four things is huge is, number one, you got to the dairy. The dairy nowadays is no longer like the dairy that we used to have, or the dairy that's in certain parts of Europe, where a lot of the cow milk products are pumped with so much antibiotics, steroids,
Mhm.
and medication in there. You might as well be taking all of it yourself.
Mhm.
The
Uh,
gluten creates leaky gut, right? All the problems that you have there. You got the oils that we just talked about, and then the refined carbs that's just killing our brains.
mm.
So,
And what is interesting to me, because I told you we have 38 employees, and just the lack of knowledge around like health, wellness, diet, nutrition for so many of them. Like, I I don't judge them because I don't know where they came from and what their upbringing was like. But a lot of these hourly workers, like they'll have like 2 or 3 Mountain Dews a day, and that's just like the normal part of
right,
their diet. And I'm like, oh,
right,
you gotta stop that. And they're like why? Like, is it bad for me? I'm like, "What? Like, how do you not know some of this stuff?" They'll be like, "Yeah,
right,
I eat out, like, I'll get, like, like, fried chicken and stuff. Is that bad?" And, they're like, "Chicken's good, right?" And I'm like, "Whoa, like, how did nobody ever, like, catch you up on some of this stuff?" And, it's things that probably
yeah,
you and I take for granted, but I'm sure you totally see that with your patient population. Somebody comes in with a bad back,
exactly,
and you're like, "What are you eating?" And they're like, "Waffles for breakfast, like chicken sandwich for lunch, then I go fast food for
yeah.
dinner." And you're like, "God, gosh."
That's why patients don't bring in fast food when they have it. They don't even bring it in,
Mm,
or they'll leave it in their car. They don't even want to show us and have that conversation.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Uh, Interesting. So, talk to me about chronic pain. I know you wrote a whole book about chronic pain.
Yeah,
What did you
yeah.
learn in that process of writing that book?
How it verifies in my research how we deal with chronic pain compared to the rest of the world. How we
Interesting.
are maybe 6% of the world's population, but we consume 80 to 85% of the world's pain medication.
Mm,
And I, we're consuming 16 to 17 times more than their average country. How we can buy it off the shelf anywhere, right? 7-Eleven, gas stations, where places in Europe, you can only buy it from the pharmacy at a certain time of
mm,
the day. And the way we treat it is completely different than how the rest of the world sees it. You start studying how the rest of the world looks at chronic pain, and most of the world is looking for, okay, here's the pain, but we got to figure out what's causing it. What's the root cause of the pain? We're looking at, here's the pain. Let's cover up that symptom with something else that could potentially cause you more symptoms down the
mm,
line. And then we're wondering why we're the sickest first world country in the world while spending multiple times more than the rest of the world, you see. So it's a ever, once again, it is a ever uphill battle until Americans wake up and see that the foods that we eat, the water that we have, the
mm,
medications that we take is is not even on point with what the rest of the world is doing.
mm. What do you see being effective strategies that the rest of the world is employing?
A big thing that they're employing is their local government is not allowing a lot of the additives in their food and in their water and in their daily use products,
Mm,
right? Multiple countries ban fluoride, and here our dentists are pushing it.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for not fluorinating our water. I know
Right,
that's controversial, but I don't feel like the government has the right to put medicine into our water supply, whether or not you think that the medicine is effective. The crazy thing is like, well, what's the dose that Alex is taking? Well, it depends on how much
right,
water he drinks, and it's like that's insane. We don't dose anything like that. Like the dose, like what if they put testosterone in the water? Like, well,
yeah,
men have low testosterone, so we're gonna put testosterone in the water. Well, how
yeah,
much testosterone does Alex need to be healthy? Well, it depends on how much water he drinks, not on his actual biological needs. I
no,
just think it's crazy.
it's crazy, right? There was a study done in the early 2000s, and they did testing on the Philadelphia water, and they found traces of 200 different medications in their water,
I have heard that
drinking water.
people will urinate out their medication and then that will get
Yeah,
filtered,
they'll dump it.
but they are not when they go to the water treatment plants, they're killing off like viruses and bacteria and things like
Bacteria,
that.
yeah,
And I don't know the science
yeah. There's
behind it,
nothing to.
but you can't kill like these medications essentially.
I mean, it's mixed in there, right? We don't have a process. It was never a process. Most wastewater treatment plants were built decades ago,
Right.
right? When we didn't have this problem. I used to work at the UC Davis wastewater treatment plant as a lab tech.
Mm.
We look at E. coli, we did sediments, and we did ammonia. I mean, everything. But no one's looking at medication traces
Mm. And
in there.
this is one of the potential points brought up for why testosterone rates are dropping in the United States. There's probably 15 different reasons, but one of
Right, right,
them
right.
that people propose is that well, like so many women are on birth control now, and they urinate that out, and these
Right.
hormones kind of cycle again through the water supply. So you're drinking it,
Yeah.
you're bathing in it, you're showering in it, you're feeding your dog and your
Yeah.
cat with it. I don't know if that's the reason or one of the reasons amongst many, but I heard Callie and Casey Means talking about this. Like there are no,
It's a valid reason.
yeah, there are no compounds that like as a byproduct put off testosterone. All of these compounds as a byproduct put off these xenoestrogens, which are like estrogen mimickers. So that's like in the plastics and certain foods and certain storage
Right.
mechanisms and certain like
Right. All
PFAs
the
and
phthalates and yeah.
plastics, exact, and like these estrogens in our water. Whereas there's absolutely no like coinciding testosterone boosting mechanisms out there just accidentally in our life.
Right. Right. No, you're right.
So, what do you see as the future of medicine? Like, how do you foresee this going into the future? Um, and I'm hoping you have an amount of hope, but tell me if you don't have an amount of hope for the future.
I have a hope for people that we are in contact with. I have hope for people who want to actively make a shift and make a change. The hope that I have less for is for people who are not actively seeking to take care of their body. Living where we live, if you just go with the flow, you're not going to make it. It's not going to look great. Oh yeah, I'm just going to be nonchalant. I'm just going to go with the flow and do what everybody else is doing. You're going to end up being a statistic where the average American over 50 years old is on 5 minimum to 8 prescription medications. Right? You're on that route of where the standard American diet, the SAD diet, right? And you're going to end up being a statistic. But the hope is where podcasts like yours go out there, voices like mine, we continue to speak about it, and people catch it, and they're so fed up about it that now they do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We got to get to that tipping point. We're not there yet.
Mm. I think that, like I said previously in the conversation, I do think COVID just like accelerated everything because I think a lot
Yeah.
of people just did not trust the way that that was managed, both from a government level to a medical industry level, like issues with like NIH and even the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
There was a lot of issues I think that people saw. And then I think more people are having experiences like the ones that you described at the beginning of the podcast, where like you have back pain or you have an issue with your nerves in your face, and you go to 5 or 6 doctors and you have a bad experience with 5 or 6 doctors in a row, and you
Right.
go, wait a minute, this is how it works. Like, I have to take personal autonomy of myself, even though these doctors are telling me not to do my own research. Which there's a joke that I love. I think it's Jimmy Dore who said it. He's like, they tell you you're not supposed to do your own research. He's like, back in my day, they used to just call that reading. That was what they called it when I was a kid. Doing your own research was just called
Right.
reading.
Right.
So I think that you are reaching a point where people have had so many bad experiences that and that's probably great for your business, because every bad experience in the traditional medicine sphere probably creates someone who's like, hey, look, I went to the back doctors in the GPs or the physios or whoever it was, the neurosurgeons, and I did not get the result that I wanted.
Right. And they're going to realize that. And I hope that more and more people are realizing it. Like you mentioned, COVID's woken up a lot of people, and a lot of people are fed up with our system. And we just got to educate each other and spread the word. As more message is going out there, I'm hopeful that more and more people see it and at least think about it, right? Think about it before they just, oh, ibuprofen, Tylenol is the best thing in the world. And I tell people, the reason you have a headache is not because you have a lack of Tylenol and ibuprofen in your system. I promise you
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And what I've heard is medicine just moves very slow, right? Because
17 and a half years.
yeah, doctors get educated in the, mid thousands, and then they start to actually practice in like the teens. And then, by 2024, so much of that information is different. But it's like, I've been so busy seeing patients that, like, hey, the standard of care is like we prescribe this person a statin. And you're like, that's not the standard of care any longer. Or even if it is considered the standard of care, that's not the best approach anymore. But like to go back and get
Right.
those guidelines actually changed is so difficult that everyone's so far behind.
And the average is 17 and a half years. If a new study came out that is validated by science, it will take 17 and a half years because of all the loopholes that someone has to jump through in order for it to be implemented. That is if they choose to implement it. Will take 17 and a half years,
Hmm.
right? I mean, we're constantly behind.
But I think, to your point, there is people out there who can quickly get this info out. And some of those channels are like the biggest channels on YouTube and the biggest podcasts. Like,
Absolutely.
people love Dr. Huberman and Dr. Mike Israetel and Dr. Mike, the other Dr. Mike, the handsome Dr. Mike. People love those channels because they're putting out like good, solid information, and it's instant. It's like, hey, this is the thing
Yeah,
that you can do now. And I think that's a great thing. I think that it is helping people wake up.
absolutely.
Talk to me about your business, brother. You've got a successful clinic. I saw that you were talking about opening more clinics, and then clearly this real estate
Yeah.
thing is just like this bug clearly has bitten you. Uh, Tell me about the development of your medical business, and then talk to me about your real estate business a little.
Yeah. So, when we first started our practice, it was mainly a chiropractic practice. And it was a chiropractic office for the first 8 years in practice. Me, another associate doctor, and 2 staff members. And that's all we did was just adjusting spines. And I said, this can't be the only thing that people need to take good care of their bodies. And we were just so zoned in on their spines, right? I said, we've got to look at other areas that is affecting their bodies. And I started in 2016, started looking at seminars to go to better myself more and more and more. And we started including, okay, dietary changes, supplementation. and started looking at, oh my gosh, the compression of the spine and the disc and the nerves, the alignment itself, it needs to get opened back up non-surgically. We started incorporating decompression and laser therapy. And as I went to more conferences, we started looking at, oh my gosh, what is this neuropathy thing? What is neuropathy? And neuropathy is where people with diabetes, 80% end up with some form of numbness, neuropathy in their feet. My grandmother herself spent the last 5 years, she's a diabetic, spent the last 5 years of her life in a wheelchair,
Mm.
and then the last 2 years of her right foot amputated.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't understand. I didn't know neuropathy was something that could be reversed. And
Mm.
when I learned, I said, are you kidding me? Where has this been hiding?
Mm-hmm.
How does the world not know about this? My own grandmother who took care of me ever since I was a child. You mean this could have been reversed? What? But no one knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
We brought that into the office, and we expanded our 1,600 square foot office now to a 4,400 square foot office. And, and it's, 2 other doctors besides myself and 5 other staff members. And it's grown significantly as we have added more services, but as we have taken care of more problems.
Mm.
See, the problems we treat and the severity of the problems we treat, when we have become more specialized in certain areas than just chiropractic, and that's how our business has grown over time,
Mm.
very organically, you know.
I think it's interesting to see you take that same philosophy with like a back injury and say, well, we need to get you healthier as a whole. We need to like reduce, because it really sounds like a lot of
Right,
these are diseases of inflammation. They're not really diseases of like back pain injury.
right. Over time, inflammation is the one true cause of all diseases. This
Mm.
was written in the Guyton Physiology book back in the 1920s,
Mm.
100 years ago. They wrote about this in a textbook, right? Inflammation causes all diseases. And when you are in the inflamed state, well, over time, we got to break that back down. And you can't just look at one thing. It would be a disservice to me if I only looked at one thing and I'm just going to pray that you're going to get better. I've talked to doctors. They said, I don't tell my patients about diet. I don't talk to them about diet. And these are chiropractors, by the way, the more natural, holistic, right?
Right.
I don't talk to my patients about diet. I said, why is that? Well, because we get a lot of pushbacks and no one's ever going to do it.
Mm.
And I said, that's why you don't talk to them about it? I said, you got to be kidding me.
I think that a good argument that I've sort of heard is that we're sort of infantilizing people, like just saying like, well, this person's not smart enough to take my diet advice, or this person's not,
Right,
hardworking enough to take my diet advice. And to your point,
right,
it's like, hey, look, I can educate them, and then the choice is on them. Like, I can't force someone to eat the meals that I want. I can't hold them hostage in my house and only feed them, grilled chicken and broccoli. They get to choose what they do, but give them the information. This is like, this is like
yes,
censorship 101. It's like Alex isn't smart enough to hear information about the vaccine. It's like,
right,
just tell me the truth and I'll make my own decision. But you have to tell me the
right.
truth and let me
That's
decide.
it. That's it. As a doctor, our duty is to tell patients the right information, the facts,
Hmm.
right? Like earlier in our conversation, my job is to educate you on what is going on with you. Your job is to take that information and do what you need to do with it,
Hmm.
right? You got to take the action, you know. And it blows me away till this day when doctors tell me stuff like that.
Mm.
And I said, you gotta be freaking kidding me.
Y-
you know?
Not to well, and I think that across the board, there's a incentive problem. The incentive for most doctors does not really align with, if I can give Alex good diet and nutrition advice, like, I don't make more money, right? Like, there's no money being
Right,
made off of like you having a good diet and good nutrition. In maybe some
right,
ways, unfortunately, and I've had this conversation with people in the medical industry before, if you were really cynical, you would say, like, the best thing that I can do financially is keep Alex dependent on me, like adjusting his
right.
spine, giving him a medication, you know, what dry needling his knee over and over and over again. And I don't think that
Yeah,
I don't think there's many doctors out there who consciously think like, I'm gonna hook Alex on like a statin that he always has to come back to
right.
me and get his blood work done every 4 months, 6 months. I don't think that consciously people are thinking about that. But the reality is that incentives affect people's behavior. And if the
Yeah,
incentive is aligned with keep Alex dependent on me at some capacity, people are going to perform those behaviors.
right. And you're so right because there is no incentive. It doesn't pay the doctor anymore to try to battle you to eat better, right? And you gotta really look at the real why I'm doing this. Is I want to make sure that the places that my family grows up in and the communities that we live in is healthier now than before I got here, and I leave it healthier than when I'm here. And I want that to be passed on to the next generation for them as well. Because if I can get through the parents and grandparents, I'm hopeful that they can now influence their next generation, right? At the end of the day, I think we're some people are just too short-term thinkers, where we need to be more long-term and impactful thinkers.
Mhm. Yeah, I've talked to more than one person on this podcast about this sort of business idea that I have. It's kind of a flipping of the incentive, and from uh, your perspective as a doctor in the business field, tell me how you think this would work. So my idea is sort of, you put some sort of like an insurance, right? Like right now, I pay medical insurance, whatever it is, $400 a month, and
Right,
then they cover a certain amount of my visits to the doctors. One of the great problems, though, is that one, the insurance company doesn't think that I'm going to stick with them for multiple years. So
mhm,
their incentive is to spend as little on me in the next 24 months as they possibly can, because they know if I'm on medical mutual now, I'm going to go to Anthem Blue Cross at the end of 24 months. And then I'll spend 24 months with Anthem Blue Cross. And then I'll move over to the next carrier. So they don't want me to spend right now. And two, if I'm proactive with my health, that's a cost that they have to incur. So it's like, hey, I want like a full panel of blood work, not like this little baby panel that checks my cholesterol. Like, I want hormones, I want vitamin levels, I want all of these inflammatory markers. And for the way that I understand it is the insurance companies just say like, no, we're not going to cover that. That's too expensive. So they have an incentive to deny you getting medical care that would be preventative instead of preventing it. So I would kind of flip it on its head. Like, let's say you're my doctor. I'm paying $400 a month right now. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay you $400 a month. And we probably need to have some sort of an accident plan, right? Like, if I'm snowboarding and break my collarbone, like,
right,
that's going
right.
to blow up our you and my deal, right? So yeah, let's get some coverage for that. Like, and accident plans are super cheap. Like, I think I pay like maybe $20 a month for like an accident plan that would cover, like, I don't know, some huge amount of medical bills, $250,000. Um, so I pay you $400 a month, and you proactively put me through things that you think will keep me healthy. There probably also needs to be a time frame associated with it, right? Like, we're going to sign like a 5-year deal together, essentially. With maybe there's opt outs, obviously. We don't want to, we're not getting married, but you keep the $400 every month that I stay healthy. And as you have to put more money back into me, and like, if I, like, let's say I get diabetes, like, that's going to be expensive for you as the doctor. So your goal would be to keep me healthy and do proactive screenings on me to keep me from having to spend that, oh, now it's $2,000 a month because I need to take metformin and I need to take a statin and I need to do insulin and all these things. Um, Talk to me about how you foresee a sort of reversal of the healthcare system like that. Is that something that you think could work?
The first problem I can see with that is, as a doctor, how do I know you're going to do your part?
Because, it's gonna cost me more money. Well, obviously, I'm paying my $400. There'd have to be some sort of like a penalty, if you will. And also, potentially for you,
Right,
Alex. Now, here's where people get freaked out because 'cause I'm like, "Well, maybe Alex can choose to work with me if he wants." And then they go, "What about pre-existing conditions?" I get it. I totally get it. That is a problem in
right,
my
right, right,
system. And maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe there does need to be plan A and plan B for people. Um, but yeah, you could do like an interview with me and be like, "Hey, like, is this a client that I want to take on?" Every other business in the world, you get to decide what clients you take on, right?
yeah,
Like, if
yeah,
I approach an accountant and I'm like really annoying and difficult, they go, "Hey, like, we're not interested in doing business together." Cool, no problem. Um, so yeah, that would be probably something there, and I would have to have some sort of a financial penalty probably if I was not performing on my end. Not to mention the health outcome.
right, right, right. So there's a lot of moving parts. I don't know enough about it. Never dove into insurance coverage and whatnot. Our services are all out of network,
Hmm.
mostly out of pocket in the office. So it's yeah, I've never looked into a model like you're talking about.
Well, I don't know if it exists anywhere. And this is something that I've had
Yeah,
this
I don't know.
conversation with 2 or 3 different people that are kinda in the healthcare world, because it just feels like then the doctor has an incentive. If you're my doctor and you go,
Hmm.
okay, $400 a month times 12, that's about $5,000 a year times 5 years is the term. Okay, Alex is going to pay me somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 over the next 5 years. That's my budget, right? Like, now I can do $5,000 of preventative care with Alex over the next 5 years. Like, that's not even really going to be that expensive. I'm going to order these blood tests. Maybe even I'll do like a full body MRI just to see if he has any risk of like blowing up. And we'll get him into the clinic like, you're essentially now protecting your asset, right? Like,
Right,
I'm your asset. I'm your cash cow. Like, you need to keep Alex healthy. And then we have pre-established metrics that are like health. Like, hey, if you can keep my cholesterol in this range, like, then you keep this and things like that. So I don't know. It's just something that I've talked to more than one healthcare
it's
person
definitely
about.
it's definitely interesting,
I think
and
I think it's
we definitely have a yeah an incentive to keep patients healthier. I tell our patients, I said, my goal is to see you less over time, not more.
mhm.
Right? Most are reverse healthcare. Our healthcare now that we stand is, oh, as you get older, I'm going to see you more and more and more. The doctors,
Mhm.
right? I tell our patients, the longer you're in care with me, I want to see you less and less and less.
Mhm.
But as I see you less, that also means you have to take better care of you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
So what about the real estate business, Alex? How has that become such a big part of what you do?
The reason why real estate has become a big part of what I do is when I started reading the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, that
Cla
some people call it the Purple Bible.
Classic starting point for every, business person. Gosh, you wouldn't believe how many people I talk to that are like, "Well, I read this book. It's called Rich Dad Poor Dad." Like, "Yep."
Yeah, and it was the idea of what do the wealthy people do in this world, that had we not gotten the education and grew up in a lower income class out of Oakland, California, and heck, we were just trying to stay alive, man. We weren't thinking about. We were just trying to. My thought was growing up. If I can grow up and get a decent job, work till I was 65, and then retired, man, I'm good. I have a house, got a car, kids are good. I mean, that's it. No one ever taught us how money works. And when I realized how it worked, I'm like, oh my God, investing is the key. I tell you, my goal board back in 2011, 2012 was all full of flashy cars, watches, and expensive materialistic things.
You got to have those
Okay.
goals before you get going. Then once you get going, you go, boy, that was stupid.
That was like, oh my God, once you could afford those things, like what was I thinking?
Mm-hmm.
We got to move that into something that we can invest in. And I tried doing single family. Single family works for some people. It was just too time consuming for us. And so I started looking into multifamily. And when I learned how, single family is one door, you lose a tenant, that's 100% of your rent out the door. Multifamily, you have one manager that manages multiple apartments. Wow, that sounds better. And you could do it with other people and partners. Yeah, you can do it on your own. Can I do things on my own? Absolutely. But man, I love doing it with other people. It's just more fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as we start seeing our passive income start to grow, and eventually our passive income covers my expenses, I said, people said, well, that's what you call financial independence. When your passive income start covering your living expenses. I said, I never knew that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now my goal is sharing with other doctors and other business owners, like, hey, you don't just have to trade time for money, and then go buy stupid stuff. Go invest that money so that you can have the option to walk away if you want. Option. I love what I do. Don't get me wrong. But if tomorrow I decide to say, you know what? Screw it. I'm done. Then I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
My life just goes on, man. Nothing's changed.
Mm-hmm. Well, it also opens your time up that you're not so bound to money that you have to make these
Yes.
certain sacrifices that people in the medical industry are making on a day-to-day basis, whether that be more hours or they're sacrificing a little bit of their moral compass. Like, this isn't really how I want to treat people, but
Right.
I work for this hospital group and I got to see, 420 patients per month. So I got to just slam them in through, and I don't really get a lot of time to talk to them. So I
Right.
prescribe them something and then poof, they're out the door.
That's it. That's it. I get to treat people the way I believe they need to be treated, not what the insurance company tells me how I can treat them.
Mm.
And that's the thing. I do not want to be enslaved by insurance companies.
Mm.
And it's a blessing that we've been able to do that with our whole team.
Mm. So what are
And I count my blessings every day.
what do those real estate deals fundamentally look like? It sounds like you're doing multifamily. You've sort of moved away from single doors. Just maybe
Yeah.
walk me through kind of what that process looks like and how you're actually getting doctors involved.
Well, ultimately, what happens is we have partners who are boots on the ground that live and operate in areas that are not in California, but are in areas like, for example, Indianapolis, Kansas City, right? Pennsylvania, Cincinnati, Omaha, where you notice I've just named off quite a bit of Midwest places that we like to invest,
Yeah.
where you got to meet good people. Relationships is key in real estate. It's not about the numbers. And we go out, and whether it's a joint venture where, hey, 4 or 5 of us buys an apartment on our own, or we put the deal together and we underwrite many, many, many deals to make sure it's the right one.
Hmm.
And now we get investors involved who want to invest passively. See? And ultimately, that's what it is. Sometimes it's like 8 doors. Sometimes it's like 60 to 80 doors. Sometimes it's more,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now we give doctors an opportunity to get passive income, which is how I got started. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I chose to become active
Yep.
because there were so many doctors that were reaching out to me and saying, hey, Alex, tell me a little bit more about this. Tell me a little bit more about that. eventually I said, I need to get more educated to figure out what to tell these guys, you know? So, and then that's how we ended up doing what we're doing.
So you are basically managing the process of going out, isolating these properties, evaluating them for possible deals, and then
Right.
you'll start the funding process. You'll say, "Hey, we need maybe it's $2 million complex. We need to raise 400 grand for the down payment."
Yeah.
You'll pull eight investors together. Hey, everybody, it's X number of dollars to get involved, and then they'll all put the money up. You'll go out and be the company that actually acquires the property, and then
Correct.
and
And in
then
those pieces, we have partners that do different pieces
Mhm,
as well. And I make sure every deal that we have, I also put my own money in
mhm.
as well.
Skin in the game.
Never trust someone who doesn't put their own money in.
Yep, yep.
Okay. So I've learned it the hard way myself.
Mm. How many properties are you a part of now? Do you know?
I think the last we checked, we're at about 500 different units,
Jeez,
500 unit counts,
that's pretty serious
and
scale.
that we're involved in. It's owned by, of course, our team. Investors are involved, right? And these are my active deals
Mhm,
that we're a part of.
and those
Yeah.
damn banks that own most of everything, right?
Well, hey, the banks are your biggest partners.
That's true.
They're your biggest partner, and we love the relationships that we've built with the banks.
Well, I hope
So
you did a lot of your deals in 2020 and 2019 and 2021 when our rates were 2.875, because I don't know if we're going back.
yeah. Oh, but there's deals to be had right now, you know, and it's in whatever market there is, there's always deals to be had.
Mm.
But now you just have to underwrite a lot more because not everything's going to pencil out.
I see. So it's a little bit more
Um,
challenging, but it's still there to be had.
it's still there to be had. You just have to make sure you're doing it right. See, here's where a lot of people got in trouble in 2019 and 2020 is real estate was going so well, a lot of people quit their jobs
Mm.
and they end up doing that because they realize, well, whatever I buy, even if I just sat on it, I'll sell it a year or two later and it's going to go up in prices and go up in value, right? Many people quit their jobs, and now those people who quit their jobs, who was stuck and couldn't get their jobs back, is now forced to do bad deals.
Mm.
Forced. Because they get something called acquisition fees. So they got to keep doing the deal to get acquisition fees,
Mm.
right? That's where the trouble lies.
Mm. So why this is something I ask to all my real estate investors that I have on. Why real estate as opposed to the other investment vehicles out there? I'm trying to,
Ah,
cuz I like real estate, Alex. We have two industrial buildings. I told you we're building a third. I have three uh individual units that I rent out. But real estate's not my
yeah.
primary jam. I got some other jams that I like, but what would be your thoughts on why real estate above other investment methods?
Well, there's a big thing that we pay here in the States called taxes.
Oh gosh, tell me about it.
And there's really two investments that you can hedge against taxes. One's real estate, the other one's oil and gas.
Mm.
I don't know enough about oil and gas,
Yeah, you and me
so we
neither.
end up
Yeah.
doing real estate.
Yeah.
And in real estate, it is a hard asset, right? A hard asset as it's one of the human needs. We need food and water. We need clothing. We need a place to stay, a roof over our head. And as homes are becoming less and less affordable, you're not going to get affordable housing anywhere anymore, especially with the interest rates, like you mentioned, right? The amount of income versus the gap between income and housing is spread so hard,
Hmm.
so far. And more people are renting. No one wants to go cut their yard, okay, or trim the trees and the grass. So more people are renting. That's a hard asset, right? Something I can go see, visit, something that I can change the appreciation by doing something called force appreciation, not just, oh, just wait it out type
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's tax incentives. It provides great cash flow. And I get to do it with people that I like to do it with. That's why I chose real estate.
I dig it, man. Uh, well, Alex, you are, I think, doing something that's really important, both from the real estate perspective, but also from the medical perspective, my man. And I saw you had like over 900 videos on your YouTube channel, so you're putting out a lot of content, and I think that that's an important voice to have out there in the ether of medical opinions.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What you're doing is super important as well. Looking through the podcast that you have, the people that you've interviewed, I'm honored to be on.
Where can people catch up with you? Where's the best place to find what you're doing, learn about your medical business, learn about your real estate business, and if they're in your area, come see you?
Yeah, our website is absoluteintegrativehealth.com. Our office is Absolute Integrative Physical Medicine. That's where you can find things about our YouTube channel on health and everything. For our real estate, you can look me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, between meetups and webinars. We're always got some new things cooking up to educate people and to share what we're doing currently with the rest of the world. So that's how you can find us.
Five
And if people who are ever in the Northern California, Lake Tahoe area, let's hook up and grab a bite.
500 units, man, that's no joke. So you're definitely doing the right stuff, and I'm sure there's a lot to be learned from you and your experience out there.
Well, we try. We try. Thank you.
You and me both, man. Thank you, Alex.